Okay, I've talked about reinforcement, positive and negative. Now for just a few minutes I'd like to talk about weakening a behavior. Two things we want to do to a behavior. We want to strengthen it, reinforce it, or we want to weaken it. When it comes to weakening a behavior, we have a couple of options. The first would be punishment, and the second one would be reinforcement removal. Okay, let's talk about punishment first. Punishment is the presentation of an aversive stimulus contingent upon a response that reduces the rate of that response. Well, what in the world does that mean? That's pretty wordy, very technical, and kind of talks in a circle. So I'm going to try a slightly different version of this, my own little take on this, and that would be the presentation of an aversive stimulus after an undesired behavior is performed. That's punishment. We have an aversive stimulus, and it happens right after some particularly undesirable behavior is performed by the organism. A couple of examples of this. Okay. A young child takes something that does not belong to him. His father catches him doing this and spanks him. So the red text would be the undesired behavior, taking something that doesn't belong to you, and the aversive stimulus would be spanking. A young army recruit runs very slowly, and is the last person to finish a running drill. The sergeant makes him do 20 extra push-ups for being slow. Okay, again, the red text, he's running very slowly, he's the last person to finish, and the sergeant gives him a punishment. He gives him an aversive stimulus, do extra push-ups for being so slow. So in both cases here we have a behavior that is undesirable, taking something that doesn't belong to you, or being very slow to finish a drill where you're supposed to be pushing yourself. And for both of these, right after, you get an aversive stimulus being introduced. Okay? Now you might say, aversive stimulus, you notice that's part of the definition there. That sounds familiar. We've heard talk of an aversive stimulus before. Doesn't that sound like negative reinforcement? Well, negative reinforcement is often confused with punishment, but it's not the same thing. Let's take a look at a couple of things about it. First of all, the goals. What's the goal of negative reinforcement? It is to strengthen behavior. What's the goal of punishment? To weaken a behavior. So right off the bat you can see they have two different goals: strengthen and weaken behavior. Second thing is, look at the structure. For punishment we have kind of a two-part structure here. We have an undesirable behavior, and then we have an aversive stimulus that's introduced right after. For negative reinforcement, we start with the aversive stimulus. This produces the escape behavior, and then the aversive stimulus is subtracted from the situation, making this a three-part process. And escape behavior is strengthened. Okay? We want this behavior to get stronger. We want this behavior to get weaker. There are some advantages to punishment. First of all, it can stop behavior quickly. It's a very good quick fix. Second thing is it can communicate. It's a very memorable way to communicate with an organism which behaviors are and are not desirable. It has some disadvantages. One is the effectiveness is short-lived. It's a good quick fix, but it doesn't always last long. Second, it can produce some very undesirable side effects. For one thing, fear. Consider this situation. If you punish someone for an undesirable behavior, they have a couple of choices about how to react to this. First of all, they can decide not to perform this behavior again because they don't want to receive this stimulus. They can also make another choice. They can turn this aversive stimulus into the beginning of this process. In other words, they perform a certain undesirable behavior, you give them a punishment, they may say, oh, I don't like this punishment, so I'm going to cut class. That way I don't have to deal with this aversive stimulus or punishment. Okay? So you have to be careful that you don't produce an effect which turns this into this. Okay? Second thing is, in terms of undesirable consequences, aggression and anger. Punishment can actually cause organisms to seek revenge. It can cause a model to be set up for solving problems through aggression and anger. Finally, learned helplessness. If someone is always in trouble, if they're always getting punishment, after a while they just sort of say, what's the point? It's useless. I just can't do anything, and they develop what's called learned helplessness. We'll talk about this again a little bit more in the next video.